Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I came here to bury Caesar, not praise him. What's up, y'all? This is episode 3 of the MC Lars podcast, coming at you like a riverboat full of flavor down the Mississippi River. It's your host, MC Lars, and I am very happy this week to be here with Schäffer the Darklord. Now, this interview, like the Front Lot one, ran mad long. It was like 2 hours, so I trimmed it down to 2 shorter segments. So this week and next week, you're going to hear my interviews with Schäffer the Darklord. I love Schäffer the Darklord because he's an awesome guy to tour with. He's a great collaborator. He's a great friend. He's sensitive. He's smart. He's wickedly funny. His flow is awesome. And he's one of those guys who I feel like in a different reality still could be, but could have been a platinum selling comedic horrorcore rapper. And everything he does about his art, I adore, and everything about the guy I love. And he was at my wedding with his partner. They came, and it was just awesome to have a friend like this. And I just am really glad I got to talk to him. So Schäffer the Darklord, in this episode, we talk about his origins and how he got started rapping after playing in grindcore and punk bands, and his first experiences with touring, which we'll get into more in the second episode. But what's crazy is we both realized we lived in San Francisco in the Bay Area around the same time. I was an undergrad at Stanford, and he was working out there and doing music, and he'd read one of the first press pieces ever about me, and he thought, oh, we might be friends one day. And I had heard one of his songs on Boing Boing on a old school blog back in the day. And his song, Revenge of the Clone Effer, which is a very filthy, funny, home produced, great song. And I was like, I want to be friends with this guy. Hopefully he's not a serial killer. So this week is Schäffer the Darklord, and I hope y'all are going to enjoy it. I want to do some shout outs. Thank you to the new Patreon subscribers, specifically to Michelle, Jamie, and Logan. They all subscribed in the past week. They all pledged. Thank you to all the old Patreon supporters. I am, for the next few weeks on Patreon, I just finished reading all the Chronicles of Narnia. So I made an EP, and I'm calling it the C.S. Lewis EP, but I'm releasing it song by song, where I do a song about each of the 7 books of the Narnia Chronicles. So if you want this exclusive C.S. Lewis flavor, log on to patreon.com/MCLars and check it out. There's a lot of awesome stuff on there. You get the old back catalog. I'm into it. You'll be into it. I really enjoy Patreon, and so check out that platform. Mega Rain and I just made an album. Thank you to our Kickstarter supporters. We are basically done. We're just finishing 1 or 2 more guest vocals we're waiting on, and then we'll have the mastered version. We'll slide into your DMs, the supporters, before we go on tour. You'll get a copy of it, and we'll have the official release date soon. But yes, that's coming. I'm on tour with Schäffer the Darklord, MC Frontalot, and Mega Ran in October. Go to nerdcoretour.com. This coming weekend, I'm playing RavenCon, which is a festival in Virginia and in Richmond. And it's awesome because it's an Edgar Allan Poe music-themed event, which is freaking crazy. So check that out. That's this Saturday, the 22nd. And yeah, that's basically it. I want to thank you all for listening. The podcast has gotten a great reaction, and I feel like everyone's comments and everything have been super inspiring. So please tell your friends. Please rate and review it. Even if you hate it, write a comment on iTunes. It helps to see that people are engaged. Speaking of engaged, I just got married. So shout out to Married Life, to everyone out there, single, married, looking, finding love, finding passion, following your paths, and manifesting your greatness. Speaking of which, this is my interview, part 1, with Schäffer the Darklord on the MC Lars podcast. This is The Force Awakening, and speaking of Star Wars fans, I'm hanging out with one of my favorite people I've ever worked with, toured with, recorded with, a New York City, I wouldn't say native, but resident, a great friend. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Schäffer the Darklord. We're recording in Schäffer's apartment, and I won't tell you exactly where it is, but we recorded, last time I was here, I was on his and Lugo's podcast.
Right. That was, almost 3 years ago?
Oh my, 3 years ago? 2015?
Yeah. It was in 2015. So. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, how long have you and Lugo been doing your podcast together?
We started in the summer of 2012. I think our first episode was in August of 2012, and it's a monthly, but there have been a couple of months that we've missed here and there.
So I was like halfway between now and then. Like,
yes.
If you were to draw a line,
Yeah.
that's a ruler, I was 6 inches deep.
You absolutely were.
Oh my gosh, I didn't mean like that. I meant like
you are the what is it? I don't know the
median.
I was gonna say is there's median, mean, and the other one I don't remember my public education.
So Schäffer, as many of y'all know, he has 2 beautifully hairless cats. Anyone who follows him on social media knows that they are very important in his life. And there's one right now slinking across the desk. And I was surprised by 2 things today. First of all,
okay,
how warm your hairless cats are.
Yes, they're very warm. Their bodies tend to run a little bit warmer to compensate for the lack of fur. And because they have this kind of velvety skin, I've always described what they feel like as a velvet hot water bottle.
Oh, that's good.
I ripped that off. There was this science fiction bookstore in the Mission when I lived there in San Francisco many years ago, and they had a store cat that was a sphinx, a hairless cat named Ripley, which is a great name in a science fiction bookstore, and also a good description of what their skin looks like. And they had a little sign on the wall that had like some questions about that customers would ask about the hairless cats, and one of them was, "What does Ripley feel like?" And the answer was a velvet hot water bottle.
But what also surprised me is they're not actually hairless. Like,
no, there is a very fine layer of fuzz. One of my cats is, he's mixed with a little something. So he's got things like those whiskers that come out of their foreheads, like regular cats do.
Yeah.
My younger one is, he's more of a pure breed, and so he doesn't have that. He has almost no hair at all, but there's still like this very fine layer of kind of peach fuzz.
So I want to talk about how I first discovered the music of Schäffer the Darklord. I want to talk about your journey as an artist, your process as a creator, and kind of like how you see yourself in the hip hop world and where you're going with your future projects. Like, those are the 3 or 4 things I want to cover. And I think we can I think there's enough background that we don't have to like explain all of our working relationship, but I want to talk more like about just your life as an artist, because I don't think we ever sat down and had like a clear conversation like this.
I don't think we have either, now that you mention it.
Which is kind of tight.
Yeah. So yeah, this makes the audience privy to this new development in our friendship. That makes it special. It's
real life, G. I first met Schäffer. I first heard Schäffer's music in 2006, probably late 2006. I heard your Clone Effer song on a blog or something like that. Uh-huh. Someone on MySpace sent me a link to it, and I remember listening to it, and I was like, first of all, I thought it was cool because I could tell it was like home recorded, and I could tell it was like something you did on your own. And also I was like, whoever made this is like insanely twisted but insanely imaginative, and I really like would love to meet this person one day and see what they're like off the microphone. Because like the thing about indie rap is that it's so much about being yourself. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But you play this character, especially in that song where you have this strange science fiction, horror, sexual imagination thing. And I was like, this guy could either be like someone I really want to be friends with, or someone who like I really don't want to have, like, I don't want him to have my phone number. Can you tell us about that song? And like, would you agree that was like one of your early viral things?
It was one of my first songs not one of my first hip hop songs, but it was one of my first Schäffer the Darklord songs. I'd had a hip hop project before, but then that group, which was based in San Francisco, we were called The End of the World. When we split up, Rocco and I, we were the 2 main MCs in that group. We started our solo careers, and I immediately started moving all of my stuff in a direction of being kind of influenced by all of my years in heavy metal, as well as I just wanted to be kind of disturbing and crass and shocking. I really felt like I had this responsibility to try to make a strong impact with an audience. And I think it was because I didn't feel very secure as a solo artist. I had this great show and this great rapport with this other rapper, and now I was on my own, and I was like, I've got to like either make people sick or aroused or shocked, something. I had to get like a strong response. And so, yeah, I think Clone Effer was my third song.
So what were your first two songs then?
After going solo, one of them, I think I wrote like a self-referential song to be just a kind of like a mission statement to say, this is who my character is now, called I Am Schäffer the Darklord. I don't remember what the second one is. It's probably this song called Pure Evil that was built on samples of this grindcore band that I used to play drums in. And then I think Clone Effer was when I started getting into this really kind of gross comedy, which was a period that lasted for quite a while. And that song, it definitely got the sort of range of extreme responses that I was looking for.
And what kind of stuff were you doing with your early projects? Like, what were some of your lyrical topics of your first hip hop project?
Our first hip hop projects, or my first ones. My very first hip hop project was when I was in college in the 90s, and it was like this secret 4-track project that
with Coolsey or nah?
No, Coolsey and I were in college at the time, but we didn't really meet each other until weeks before I moved to California.
Okay.
And then we spent these years forming a friendship after not living in the same place. But all of the stuff that I did then, all of my early stuff was just terrible, just really incredibly problematic. Me trying to mimic the kind of more hardcore elements of the gangster rap that I listened to, and it's just unlistenable to me now. It hurts.
Where can we find that? Or
you will not find that. Cool Z threatens me every day because Cool Z and I became friends around that time. He was this like also an indie musician who had his little side 4-track project called the Sucka MCs. And we were both selling our cassettes in the local record store. So we found out who each other was.
In Iowa.
Yeah, in Iowa. He's been threatening me for years that he's going to release my early stuff. And it gives me nightmares. The lyrical stuff in San Francisco, it was really all over the place. We had kind of a vague apocalyptic theme because we were called the end of the world. So we kept kind of talking about how this is, around right after 9/11 and the early years of the Bush presidency. And so we were just kind of writing a lot of songs about how we're all going to die and everything's falling apart. It started getting a little more personal. Rocco wrote a lot of songs about the experience of transitioning because that was happening in the group at the time. I was writing songs, kind of tongue-in-cheek songs about, I do a lot of drugs, I'm out of control, which ended up becoming two of the characteristics that really kind of defined our solo material going forward. We both kind of developed on that. His stuff became very socially aware and was speaking very candidly about a trans experience. And mine grew more and more into, I'm an out of control drug addict, and was kind of like in this whistling past the cemetery. Like, I'm making a joke. It's not a problem. And it really was a problem. I was really masking this kind of problem by putting it on stage and making it cartoonish.
So like, were you kind of like foils for each other, and that like did it seem like that dichotomy of someone transitioning and finding their new gender identity, and then you with substance stuff and like trying to find a balance? It was kind of like there's this I don't know, you played off each other, or like how did that dynamic work, would you say?
It did. It worked really well. Strangely, it seemed like there were these kind of disparate elements that ended up meshing really well. A lot of our material also kind of spoke to our experience of being part of this kind of punk rock performance art subculture of San Francisco, like the punks in the Mission, where we, the scene that we both ran in at that time. And so we had these elements that kind of tied it all together. And then I think even when we were talking about different topics, it all kind of worked because we developed this great rapport, both personally and rhythmically, like by trading off of one another on lyrics. And I'll say this until my final breath that experience was so good for me, because Rocco was and remains a far, far superior rapper to me.
Okay.
And so, doing my own stuff before that was kind of clowning. And then I started working with somebody who was this just brilliant kid, had so much talent and and thirst and drive. And working with him was incredible because when we would write back and forth parts, I had to really step up my game to feel like I was on the same level as him.
And that's something I noticed, like when we've worked together, is that you're a very good collaborator. Like not only are you always the first to send your verses, but they're always like really well produced and really good. And like I could tell that you kind of, I guess those skills you learn, that like you got to be quick when you're working with someone, and also like you always play well off. You always find lyrical connections with the songs we've done together where you connect the dots in ways I wouldn't have thought. And I guess that comes from your genesis being part of this group.
I think it does. And I think that I do a lot of collaborations. I've done many with you. Those I find are, to this day, are the most valuable experiences in this. Because you can kind of, I found that, as an indie artist, you can get to a point where you kind of coast on your morals. You have an audience that your fans like you. They like the stuff you do. You can keep like kind of plugging out or chugging out your solo songs, and that you're going to have this audience that's going to respond to them. But you get a collaboration request, and this person has another audience, a bigger audience or a different audience, and now you're not just the one element of creative control in the process. So I feel that every time I get a collaboration, I'm kind of auditioning for my friend. And I want it to be good. I want it to be something that they're proud to release. And I want it to be something that feels not like two people recorded their parts separately, thousands of miles apart, and then just meshed it all together. But instead it feels like it's part of a through narrative in it. And so I try to kind of match rhythmic elements or match certain rhyme schemes or match references and without doubling up on them.
Yeah. And I think that, I always like that. I learn new things about it, like in our pop culture ones. One specifically that comes to me is the Bruce Campbell song. You're the one dude on that song who really referenced Bruce Campbell. We're all like serial killers, and like you nail all the Evil Dead and Army of Darkness references in that verse. And like when I go back and see those movies, I'm like, oh, I get it. I get what you.
I hope you rot down there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought about that at the time too, and I liked that. I liked that you did a verse about kind of horror themed and had Jeffrey Dahmer. If it was four MCs all doing a 16 with Bruce Campbell references, that song would be really tedious by the end. And it's not, right. And that's not the case. And Bryce did his own thing, and Zealous One did his own thing. Zealous One did also have a Bruce Campbell reference in there because he says, "Give me some sugar, baby."
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And I liked that. I liked that happened. I like that you will put references. That you will have a song that is ostensibly a reference-driven song, and you will make references to other pop culture things. That's a thing that I've always liked. We did this Stranger Things song, and you make references to Hellboy, Jaws, and Aliens, and it just inexplicably. And I feel that makes it richer, and it doesn't make it like just another here's another reference fest.
I mean, I think with nerd rap, and it's specifically like the nerdcore people like us who've been at it for so long. You don't want it to read as a Wikipedia article on Sideshow Bob if you're doing a Simpsons rap.
Right.
It's like for me it's like, okay, well, what can we say about Sideshow Bob? What other archetypes of the villain and like that's always fun for me. And I think that like when you work with other people, you're able to like bounce ideas off. And if you get a reaction, it's like when we hang out and talk, it's like we kind of like know so much about each other from our music, and then we're able to like get a new reaction and build, especially when we're writing together,
Yeah. I think that makes it so much better. Saying like a Wikipedia entry is an excellent shorthand for describing the
potential,
the type of song that becomes pretty common among nerdcore rappers.
Yeah.
There was a period a few years ago where it felt like there was this kind of race every time there was some new pop culture thing was released, and everybody'd be like, "Oh, I like Adventure Time. Yeah. Here comes my Adventure Time song. This is this character. This character says this. This one says this," and that became there was just oversaturation of that.
And before we get into like, I want to talk about the current state of the subgenre, but I wanted to rewind a little bit. Like, I know you've played drums in a grindcore band, right? Mm-hmm. And like, I was wondering like, if you could share, what were some of your experiences you got, especially in the Bay Area, that then helped you build your career as an indie artist? And like, what was that experience like at that time? Like Like, let's talk about that for a minute. Like, how long were you playing in that band, and what were they called, and everything?
I was playing drums in 2 bands in San Francisco, and there were members in each band that were friends of mine that we'd gone to college together in Iowa, that we'd all moved to California together. I was in this one band called Bottle Dog for 10 years, and we were kind of proggy, genre hopping, kind of all over the map. Like, we would have a kind of a punk song, and then kind of like a Emerson, Lake and Palmer synthesizer, crazy time signature epic song. And
sounds kind of like Ween then.
It kind of was.
Yeah.
I mean, there were lots of like kind of subtle jokes and tons of just experimentation. There was so much.
Bottle Dog?
Bottle Dog.
Okay.
It was Bottle Dog. And then after a few years, we changed it to Bottled Og. We were just art weirdos, and we would like have goofy costumes on stage, and everything was kind of non sequiturs and weird. But there was a lot of experimentation with recording techniques and effects and instruments, and we were just kind of always trying to do something new. At times, kind of pretentious college art rock, but I felt that, you know, near the end of the time, we really found a groove where we were still pushing ourselves forward, but had a unified sound. The other band that I was playing in was a band called Burmese. It was 2 bassists and 2 drummers, and a vocalist, which was one of the bassists. And it would go like the range of this really heavy, brutal, sludgy stoner rock, like the Melvins, all the way up to this really kind of, I don't know, buzzy, blurring black metal, like Emperor, to at times like elements of like DRI's more hardcore material, but it was mostly like kind of grindcore, like blast beats and like Cookie Monster vocals.
You had one vocalist,
yeah,
and then 2 bassists and 2 drummers.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was great. The 2 bassists were both named Mike G, and the 2 drummers were both named Mark S. Too. So
was that coincidental?
Yeah.
That wasn't like your stage names. Oh,
No.
obviously Mark Schäffer.
Yeah, but yeah.
That's dope.
That band had existed before I joined. They'd had a couple of drummers, and they had a few drummers after me. But that band had kind of developed this more of a following. So Burmese shows had audiences, and it was the live performance was as aggressive as the music was. One of the mics, or both of the mics actually, would walk into the audience and get in people's faces, or like hit them with their basses, or wow. I would like tear my drums apart and throw them into the audience. And we did a show where we set up 2 2,000-watt lamps on stage, point at the audience, and during certain heavy parts we just flick them on, and the entire audience would be blinded while also being deafened. It was really aggressive, both musically and in its delivery. And I felt that kind of helped me. I've never been that physical or confrontational with my audience as Schäffer the Darklord, but I felt like I developed a kind of I could posture this kind of like aggressive confidence on stage that wasn't sincere, because I was still really insecure about this act. But I could still stand on stage and like, you know, put a foot up on the monitor, grab my crotch, and be like, I don't even care about any of you people, and just deliver this material. And that was, I think, one of the elements of being in that group that really informed this one.
So it's kind of like in the tradition of bands, Bay Area bands like Flipper, where it was just like get a reaction out of the audience, and there's an artistic like aesthetic just to that. Like, yeah. What were some of the clubs you played in San Francisco and Oakland and stuff?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know if any of them are still around, but there was like this place in the Tenderloin called Chemo's. I think it's still around. We played that room a lot. It was just brutal, and we played with so many of these extreme noise bands.
Was this like early 2000s?
Early 2000s, like 2001 to 2004. I moved to New York in 2004, and I joined Burmese in 2000. But I feel like it really kind of picked up like that second year that I was in it. But yeah, these dark, dirty rooms.
You play like the Rickshaw Stop?
Oh yeah, Rickshaw Stop opened while I was there, while I was in that band, and I played that. There was the Covered Wagon Saloon, which was like a big metal bar.
How about Hotel Utah? Or is that?
Yeah. Hotel Utah was the first show that Bottle Dog played when we first moved to New York, and it was also the going away show that we played when I moved to New York.
First moved to San Francisco, you played there?
When Bottle Dog first moved to San Francisco, we got our first gig at Hotel Utah. Didn't play it again.
Yeah.
And then our going away show, which was both Bottle Dog's last show and the Schäffer the Darklord record release party for my first album. But
that's dope.
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
really. So it bookended your time.
It bookended
there.
my time in San Francisco. Yeah.
So what was your first solo show then as Schäffer the Darklord?
It was at the bottom of the hill.
Oh wow.
Yeah. My first show was at bottom of the hill, and that was a show that Bottle Dog. We kept working really hard, but we never really developed a strong following. So we always wanted to play bottom of the hill, and we couldn't. We'd see all of our friends' bands play there all the time, and it would be kind of frustrating.
Who'd you play with, or were you headlining there, or
when I did?
Yeah.
No, I did not. I opened. I don't even remember who I opened for now, but I think it might have been Deerhoof.
Cool.
We were friends with them.
Cool.
And I don't know. Burmese played there a couple of times on some kind of bigger bills, but yeah, my first Schäffer the Darklord show was there. And this is, after the end of the world. The end of the world hadn't broken up yet, but we both started doing solo shows. And that was my first one. To prepare for it, I made sure I had like a set of at least 8 songs. I started doing comedy open mics. So
rapping or talking?
Talking.
Oh, okay. So
I could do transitional material.
Yeah.
Because I was like, there aren't 2 rappers on stage, In the end of the world, if I wanted to take a break, I could like sip on my beer or whatever, catch my breath while the other rapper does something.
Yeah.
He pulls focus. He keeps the song moving forward. I'm like, I am not interesting enough by myself to entertain an audience for 30 minutes. So I started obsessively going to comedy open mics to kind of just learn rhythm of delivering jokes for transitional material, for intros, so that I could catch my breath and to keep the audience engaged in some way.
That's cool.
But then I also overdid it, and I was like, I need a shocking appearance. I was kind of going with this Burmese thing. I need to shock them. So those first shows, and that first one at Bottom of the Hill, which is in like 2003, I got on stage and I got put on like black leather gauntlets and spikes, and I wore like black metal corpse paint, and I had a cape, and like, it was
wow, dude.
I threw too many elements at this thing. I was like, I'm going to do comedy. I'm going to do rap songs. I'm going to do my sci-fi sex fantasy number on stage. I'm going to dress like a black metal superhero. It was just a lot, and it was not all of it worked.
But you were starting with like I'm not just going to be a dude rapping to a mini disc.
Yeah.
I'm going to do something different.
I'd seen that act a lot,
Yeah.
I'd seen acts where somebody got on stage, and yeah, mini discs were that was the backing band of choice in the early 2000s.
Because it was like you wouldn't bring a laptop on stage necessarily.
No, that was unheard of.
That was like in the Bay Area around that time. That's when I started to play around San Francisco too. Because I was in college in the Bay Area, and like I'm surprised we never crossed paths.
I didn't meet you until 2006, but I first heard about you in 2002.
Wow!
Because I was in San Francisco and I had this job as a messenger for a film company that sold film to photographers and developed film. So I just drove around in a Volkswagen van, all over the Bay Area all day. And when there was downtime, I would just sit in the office and read the paper. And I remember reading an article about this kid from Stanford. Is that right? Stanford?
Yeah.
This kid from Stanford who was like making indie hip hop. I read this in San Francisco Examiner. And I remember reading it and being like, that's crazy.
This sounds
kind of like somebody like kind of a spiritual homie of sorts.
And I think that's probably like the first press I ever got. And it was like just like a little background about what I was doing at Stanford.
But it was sizable. Like there was a photo, and it was like a pretty large article on the page.
That's
at the time.
crazy, man.
Yeah.
We were destined to meet.
Yeah. And then it was like years later, and I even then remembered. I think I'd heard about you like a few times after moving to New York, but it wasn't, I don't think, until you'd asked me to come do this show in Boston that I remember reading it and being like, and telling my, well, now ex-wife, but my wife at the time being like, I read an article about this guy in the Examiner when I worked at that film company. And so, yeah, all those years later.
And I remember we met, that was at TT and the Bears.
I think so.
In Boston with Frontalot. And it would have been like February 2007.
Something like that, yeah.
And you were there waiting and you helped us load in. I was like, this guy's really nice. Like, this guy's real sweet. And then I was like, oh, you're Schäffer. Because like when I heard your music, I didn't realize I had this image that you'd be like this big, scary, corpse paint wearing fool. And you were like this really sweet, nice indie rock kid. And you're helping us set up. And you're like, I'm like, what's your name? You're like, I'm Mark. And then I piece it together like, oh, you're Schäffer the Darklord.
Yeah.
And like, I remember that show being this cool moment in my career. Because it was like, for the first time, I wasn't working with like a pop punk band or a bigger rapper. It was like you, me, and Frontalot, all in this place in Boston. And I remember it it got such a good reaction.
Oh yeah, that show was sick. I remember at the time being like, I'm certain at the time that was the most people that I'd ever performed in front of at once. Like that was the largest crowd that I'd ever played. And yeah, so I was waiting outside of the venue, but I had taken a bus there.
Oh,
and I don't know. I've told this story somewhere else, and I don't know if you and I, Damien, have ever talked about this, but you asked me to do the show.
Yeah.
It wasn't Damien, it was you, right?
Yeah.
You emailed me, you reached out and said, hey, we're doing this show. And you thought I lived in Boston.
No, here's what I think happened. Damien asked me, Frenella asked me if we knew any like good rappers in other cities. So I was like, oh, we should get Schäffer the Darklord. And he'd lived in Boston previously.
Right.
And I think he'd like read press about a show you'd done there maybe.
Oh yeah, because I'd been up there.
He thought you lived there because he'd heard of you or seen you in Boston. So I was like, we should get this guy on one of the shows. And he reached out to you about that show, I think.
Yeah.
Because you've done shows in Boston before.
That is what happened. But yeah, he did. He was under the impression that I was local. And for me, it wasn't that big of a deal. I didn't tell you guys that I lived in New York, but I had gone up there, and it was like, I'd been in New York a couple of years, but I'd taken the bus up to Boston a whole bunch of times for single shows. I'd go up there and play some show in Jamaica Plains in front of like a dozen people, take the bus home. And so going up there for a show that looked like it was going to have an audience was no problem at all. But I got there early, and I think another thing that helped me from being in those bands is that I definitely had a very maximum rock and roll, book your own life, DIY sort of work ethic.
Yeah.
In that, you play small clubs and you haul all your gear in there and you help out the other bands when you can. And so I was just eager to make new friends and also like, well, this is part of the job. Part of the job is if you're free, you help the other band load in when they had their gear. It was just like, that's the way I had learned how to do all of this.
And that is that kind of like, I feel like, the Bay Area kind of ethic, like there's a real great community back then. And I don't know, I haven't really stayed up on the local community there now, but I remember that was always the thing. Be there first and leave last. Never leave. Like the faux pas is, if you're a local, you never leave before the headliner who asked you to be there.
No, a whole bunch of people burned bridges with me by doing that very thing.
If anyone does that, yeah, I'm not going to ask them to open again.
No, it's rude and it kind of hurts my feelings.
Yeah, it's like I watched you, and so stick around.
Now, like, what do you have to do? Like, bars close at 2 in this state. You're not going to another show. You just don't want to be here. All right, I get it.
So, okay, how did you? So, when your first show, it sounds like you had like this really theatrical performance. What was the evolution to the purple suit and like your aesthetic on stage, like in the glove, like how did you figure that costume out?
I did the show. I did a couple of shows in the corpse paint and the cape and the spikes and leather. And I got booked. There was this, oh God, I can't remember what the venue was called, but there was this, it was the Parkside. There was a venue called the Parkside, and they had like a weekly metal showcase. And the person who booked it had me do it because I had songs that like sampled metal and I talked about metal and I had kind of a metal look, but I'm like, a backing track CD hip hop act.
Yeah.
And so I got booked on the show and I was psyched because there were these awesome metal bands on the bill. And I'm like, these are the shows that I would be going to because I loved San Francisco metal and I was, huge metalhead. So I did this show, and the following week there was an online forum bulletin board for the San Francisco like metal group. And I just got torn to shreds. Aww. People were so insulted by my act and thought I was terrible and that there was no point that there should be hip hop on it. And they were mad at the booker for putting me on the bill. Were you like
hosting, or did you have like a full set?
No, I just did a set.
Okay.
But I'm still like doing clone, I'm still doing my clone song and all this gear. And they were just like, they were so offended that this clown, they thought I was like making fun of them. And, that was my first experience with the internet being cruel. And
yeah,
I was like deeply affected by it.
And metalheads being traditionally open-minded.
Right. Especially when for outsiders coming into their community and doing something different, they very open arms. But I think that was then the last time that I ever wore that costume. I was so affected by it. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then, so the next show, did you just show up in the purple suit or like?
No, the next show I started doing, my next few shows after that, I was wearing an all black suit. When I had been in the End of the World with Rocco, we had worn matching suits for all of our shows. It was a black shirt, black tie, or black suit, black tie, pink shirt, like bright pink shirt. And that was just our uniform.
Yeah.
So once I ditched the heavy metal look, I just started wearing an all black suit, all like black shirt, black tie. Everything was all black all the time. I knew that I had to have some kind of look on stage. It's always been my belief that my own personal sort of philosophy is that I don't want to dress like my audience because I want things to be theatrical and I want to create this visual cue that says there is a separation between us. You know, in my punk rock days, it's very, we're all part of this thing. You play on the floor, you're all wearing like the same like jeans and t-shirts. And in this thing, I was like, I want this to be different. I want them to know I am different than you. To try to create this larger than life persona. And in some cases, it's something that's just as simple as putting on a suit. So I had a black suit for a little while. I don't think it was until I moved to New York that I started throwing purple into it. And purple had always been my favorite color. And it was
the royalty.
It's a color of royalty.
Yeah.
It's a reference to the Joker. It's a reference to Prince, who's like my favorite, like just about my favorite musician ever.
Yeah.
Another Midwestern, diminutive, narcissistic, sexually ambiguous,
legend,
musical weirdo. And yeah, purple's like always the color of villains, like all Disney villains. Like their purple is always introduced into their things. And so I was like, that's going to be something. This all black suit it's too much. I look like a funeral director or something. It was too much. I want a little flash of color. And ever since then, like in 2006, probably 2005 when I started wearing purple, ever since then, it's just been variations of that, you know, either purple ties, purple pocket squares, got an all purple suit. So I guess the purple didn't come around till 2008 because that was still representative of what I was wearing at the time.
That's cool.
The black gloves, I wore the black gloves in one show just to kind of try it out because I was like, there's something inherently creepy about somebody wearing gloves.
Right.
It looks like it could be kind of crazy doctor or murderer or like maybe a weird kinky sex thing. It doesn't even matter if you don't even have to define what it is. There's just something about these black latex gloves that creates a reaction.
Oh, they're latex?
Oh yeah.
I always thought they were leather.
Oh no.
Oh.
I buy them in bulk.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I mean, I've ever said
you're like a serial killer.
Yeah. It just there's I don't even know what it was, but I did it in one show kind of as a goof and audience members responded to it.
So tell us about the black box then. Like how did that like, and I'm sure most people listening to this have seen your show. Mm-hmm. So, but explain that because it's a little different than like than the other rappers have done.
Yeah, so my backing tracks for many years played on a device that was housed in a small black Pelican case, like a gear case that you'd put like a camera lens or, you know, an 8-at or something in. Not an 8-at, but damn, I just dated myself. You put some kind of gear in.
Mini display.
And I put some letters on it that said STD, whatever, just because I just wanted more mystery. I didn't want them to see a laptop on stage. I didn't want them to see, I just wanted them to see this box, and it ended up kind of becoming mysterious. And then people started asking me questions about it, like what's in the box? What's in the box? And then I was like, great, now I've created a mystique. I will proceed to not ever answer this question. So they can keep asking about it. And that's all it was. It was like this mystery.
And it's like the black box that survives in an airplane crash.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I had like, for a while, I kind of tried to make the black box a character. Like I had these recorded robot voices that would play in between tracks where we would do dialogue back and forth. And it was like kind of like this lazy ventriloquist act. Like I'm talking to this little suitcase on stage.
That's
I didn't do it. I did it for a while, but after a while I started like phasing those bits out because I started writing longer intros for songs and doing bits with this box started feeling kind of gimmicky.
Do you just run the track and then talk and then know it's going to start again? Or do you start, I forget, do you start and stop each song?
I start and stop. I can't. I tried using pauses for a while, but the timing of the bits is never the same because if the audience laughs, it gets dragged out.
Yeah.
And yeah, the playback device has changed, but it's still always in the box. I just don't talk about the box anymore on stage. But starting and stopping it has been kind of a pain because sometimes it's sloppy and sometimes like the track skips ahead a little bit, or I play the wrong one, or I still have to walk downstage to address the audience and still have to walk back upstage to cue my track.
Yeah.
So I recently, in the past few months, started performing with the DJ for the first time.
And that's Nelson.
That's Nelson Luga, my co-host on the Epic Podcast. Yeah.
That's cool. Okay, where did the name Schäffer the Darklord come from? I guess it's kind of self-explanatory, but when did you first be like, oh, that's a great name?
Well, so my stage name is Schäffer the Darklord, or STD, to kind of help people who have a hard time spelling Schäffer. There's a lot of spellings of it. Mine's not that common. The acronym came first.
Oh, okay, that's funny.
Yeah, it's
and then the umlauts or whatever after that.
Yeah, the umlauts came when I first started the solo act, and it was because I was trying to again send a little code to the audience that it was a metal influence thing, because the umlaut's very popular in all of the genres of metal throughout the years.
Right.
Yeah. I don't really use them that much anymore.
Yeah.
If people do, I'm honored that somebody went to the trouble, but they're not that important anymore.
Okay.
STD came first. It goes all the way back to 96 when I had my little secret 4-track rap project that was incredibly problematic and you'll never hear. I had 4 rappers that I'd created, and I would just do different voices for all of them. It was like this crappy Wu-Tang thing. And
we got to hear this lost media now.
It's so bad. I'm not going to tell you the name of the projects, then you can't find it.
Can't even Google it.
But one of the rappers was MCSTD. Because lots of their names were all gross and offensive, and so MCSTD I thought was funny. I ended up using that one the most frequently on this project because it was the easiest to rhyme with compared to the other names. When I started the group with Rocco at the end of the world, I was like, my name's going to be MCSTD, because I was so delusional and I was so young at the time that I had it in my head that the end of the world was going to take off, and that someday I was going to have all of this backlogged material that I could release as like STD's early stuff.
Kind of like Kid Rock did.
Yeah.
Right.
Which of course, it didn't take, it was only a couple years later.
Now I'm sure you have tons of fans who would love to hear it. Now it's by choice. You don't want to put that.
Yeah. Now I'm mortified at the thought of any of that stuff coming out.
Yeah.
So Rocco and I put out some stuff and did a bunch of shows, and I was MC STD and he was MC Catastrophe, and that's how it was. And then we split up. I had the same line of thought. I was like, I have all of this material as STD with the end of the world. I got to keep using that. In the end of the world, STD didn't stand it for anything. I was constantly making jokes that it would stand for something different. Like it was sadistic teenager destroyer, or scientific terror device, or my favorite one, which was something terribly deep or something totally deep, or whatever. Yeah. When I started doing it, and then when I decided to do a solo act, I was like, I have to keep using it, but I don't want to just call myself STD. So I had to come up with something to fit that acronym.
So what was the moment you're like, oh, Schäffer the Darklord, perfect?
I don't know, but
yeah.
I feel like I didn't make a very good decision. Because nobody got it, because at the time in my head, I was like, Darklord, that's one word. But it's not. That's not one word. So people still spell it as like dark space Lord, and then some people abbreviate it like SDL, and because you're not supposed to use articles and acronyms, and I just made a mess of it. And Darklord was like both a reference to all of my love of black metal as well as my like lifelong love of Darth Vader.
Thus ends part 1 of my interview with Schäffer the Darklord. I thought it was really cool. We started the interview with a Star Wars reference, and we ended with one. I mean, I did that on purpose with editing, because it's like contextual. It's like framing the narrative. It's like storytelling. It's like all that flavor. But anyway, next week is part 2. We get into some of our touring history stories, and I really enjoy how this podcast came out. So please spread the word. Tell your friends. I wanted to end with this song. This is a song Schäffer and I did a few years ago, but like 8 years ago, we were playing it on tour when we were opening for MC Chris. It's called Mad Men, and it's a telling of the story of Mad Men from the perspective of Don Draper and Roger. But when we first did the song, the show was still on the air. So Schäffer wrote the second verse and updated it and made it more modern and current. And my wife, Ash Wednesday, sings the chorus with us. This beat was produced by Joey Flash of Flashfire, and John Thatcher Longley played drums on it. And shout out to Samurai, who did some of the programming. And what else? Jason Moss did the final mix, and it's you can hear it on Spotify. It's on my compilation, Donald Trump Has Very Bad Morals. Ooh, political. No, whatever. Check it out. And thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. Have a great week. And thanks for being supporters and being so friendly. Okay, bye. This is Mad Men. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to tell you a very sad story about capitalism in America in the 1960s. The name's Don Draper, this is my story. The pain and the dream and the ads and the glory. The captain of my ship, Sterling Cooper Draper Price. The hours are insane, but the benefits are nice. It's NYC in 63. Willie Loman, hey, that's me. I live two lives, as you can see. Even lied to my family. Drink a whiskey till I pass out on my black couch. My secretary wakes me up and I'm out. I slept with one and I'll sleep with another. Korean War vet with a prostitute mother. There's Joan and Peter, Peggy, Roger. Everyone is a problem solver. Good men, bad men, you decide. We're lost in America trying to get by.
Mad men, are we really bad men? I don't really know, but I think it's kinda sad when people say we're mad men. Are we really bad men? I don't really know, but I think it's kinda sad when people call us mad men. Are we really bad men? I don't really know, but I think it's kinda sad when people say we're mad men. Are we really bad men? I don't really know, but I think it's kinda sad when people call us.
I'm Roger Sterling, man about town, whose sex lives 2 ex-wives down. I never was faithful, I never was home. Maybe that's now why I'm all alone. Look at me now, I'm not doing so well. Things fall apart and the partners can tell. Despised by my daughter, denied to be a father. To Red's love child, only 101 I've lost her. Lucky Strike's leaving, our best client. Begged to stay, they were non-compliant. I was quiet, I couldn't hide it. The others called me out and I straight up denied it. Heart attack in my office, my lifestyle hits me in the face. The firm gets sold, kinda like my soul. So old I'm gonna die in this place. We sell desire, we sell amenities. We drive consumption, we brand identities. Good men, bad men, you decide. We're lost in America trying to get by.
Mad men, are we really bad men? I don't really know, but I think it's kinda sad when people say we're mad men. Are we really bad men? I don't really know, but I think it's kinda sad when people call us mad men. Are we really bad men? I don't really know, but I think it's kinda sad when people say we're mad men. Are we really bad men? I don't really know, but I think it's kinda sad when people call us.
Everything changes, life gets harder. Peggy's promoted, Joan makes partner. Peter's in LA, Lane Price is buried. Megan sings Zubazoo, now we're married. In a dark penthouse, I drink back doubts. Roger drops acid, Sally acts out. I scare away Hershey, colleagues pee. A unanimous vote and I'm placed on leave. Static from black and white TV screams. Sticking out in Whitman, haunt my dreams. I played and I've lost, now all that I've got. An empty pack of smokes, I broke a bottle of scotch. Never seen a one I couldn't sell as a need. I'm falling from a skyscraper, picking up speed. Good men, bad men, you decide. We're lost in America, trying to get by.
Mad men, are we really bad men? I don't really know, but I think it's kinda sad when people say we're mad men. Are we really bad men? I don't really know, but I think it's kinda sad when people call us mad men. Are we really bad men? I don't really know, but I think it's kinda sad when people say we're mad men. Are we really bad men? I don't really know, but I think it's kinda sad when people call us
Good men, bad men, you decide. We're lost in America trying to get by. Good men, bad men, you decide. We're lost in America trying to get by.
This week on Mad Men, Roger Sterling does a bunch of horrible things. Everyone is surprised, but not that surprised, as social issues play out in the background.